third grade. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. Let's get started. All right. Now, do you remember how we learned last week about how to find equivalent fractions? We can use multiplication to find equivalent fractions. So, for example, if I want to find an equivalent fraction of 2/3, I'm going to multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number. In this case here, I multiplied the numerator and denominator by 2. So an equivalent fraction of 2/3 is 4/6. We can also use division to find equivalent fractions. If I want to find an equivalent fraction of 6/12 here, I can find a common factor to divide both 6 and 12 by. So I can divide 6 by 3 and 12 by 3, and I get 2/4. Okay, I'm going to just skip ahead because other ones I went over yesterday. Also recall like fractions versus unlike fractions. What's the difference between these two terms? Well, like fractions have the same denominator. Unlike fractions have different denominators. Here is an example of a pair of like fractions. We have 2/3 and 1/3. They have the same denominator of 3, so these fractions are called like fractions. Here's another pair of fractions. These pair of fractions are unlike fractions because their denominator is different. We have 2/3 and 2/4. In 2/3, the denominator is 3. In 2/4, the denominator is 4. So these pair of fractions are called unlike fractions. Let's compare unlike fractions using equivalent fractions. What does unlike mean again? It means it's a fraction with different denominators. All right, look at this example. Which is greater, 1/2 or 4/10? Well, I have the fraction 1/2 and 4/10. I want to change these unlike fractions into like fractions where the denominator is the same, okay? So I notice in my fraction 1/2, my denominator is a 2. Can I change that to become a 10? Yes, I can. If I multiply the denominator by 5, my denominator will be a 10, okay? Once I have a pair of like fractions, then it's easier for me to compare the two fractions to see which one's bigger, which one's smaller, and so forth, okay? So let's multiply our fraction 1/2, the numerators and denominator by 5, okay? And we get 5/10. So now my two fractions that I'm comparing is my 1/2 became 5/10. I'm also leaving 4/10 as 4/10. So I'm comparing 5/10 and 4/10. Which one's bigger? Which one's smaller now? Now it's easy to compare, right? Because their denominators are the same. 5/10 is bigger than 4/10 because the numerator 5 is bigger than the numerator 4. So 5/10 is greater. In this case, that means 1/2 is greater. Okay. Another example. Which is less, 3/12 or 2/4? So I want the denominators to be the same. Right now, the denominators are different between these two fractions. So these are unlike fractions. But I want to make a pair of like fractions. To do that, I have to find an equivalent fraction. Let's just take 3/12 for now, okay? And if I divide the numerator and denominator by 3, I can get a denominator of 4. That's the same as my denominator in 2/4. So 3/12, if I divide the numerator by 3, the denominator by 3, my equivalent fraction is 1/4. So now my two fractions that I'm comparing are like fractions. Is 1/4 and 2/4. My 1/4 is my equivalent of 3/12, which I got from here, and my 2/4 is the same. Which one is less, 1/4 or 2/4? Well, because the denominator is the same, let's look at the numerators. 1 is less than 2, so 1/4 is less than 2/4. So 1/4 is less, or in this case, 3/12 is less. Please pause the video and try numbers 12, 13, and 14 on your own. See you soon. Hey. All right, let's check 12. Which is greater, 8/12 or 1/3? So we're going to change 8/12 where the denominator will become a 3, okay? To do that, I'm going to divide my numerator and denominator by 4, and I get 2/3, okay? So now the two fractions that I'm comparing is 2/3 and 1/3, right? Where 2/3 is my equivalent fraction of 8/12, and 1/3 is the same. They have the same denominator, so now these are called like fractions, and it's easy to compare now. I just have to look at the numerator. The numerator 2 is larger than the numerator 1, so 2/3 is greater than 1/3. But I have to write my sentence here. What is greater than 1? Well, the thing is, I have to make sure I use my original fraction that was given in the problem. My original fraction was not 2/3, was it? No, 2/3 refers to 8/12, okay? So 8/12 is greater than 1/3, okay? All right, let's look at number 13. Which is less, 2/3 or 7/9? So I want to change my 2/3 into an equivalent fraction where my denominator is a 9, because in 7/9 my denominator is a 9, okay? So let's see, from 3 to 9, did I multiply or divide to get 9? 3 times a number equals 9, or did I do 3 divided by a number equals 9? I use multiplication, so it's actually 3 times 3 gets you 9. Whatever I do in the denominator, I have to do to the numerator to get an equivalent fraction. So let's do 2 times 3. What is 2 times 3? That's a 6. So 2/3 is equivalent to 6/9. I'm going to write that above my 2/3, 6/9, and I'm going to write 7/9 above 7/9 here. Now it's easy for me to compare these two fractions. Which is less, 6/9 or 7/9? Well, let's look at the numerator because the denominator is the same. 6 is less than 7, so 6/9 is less, but is that my original number? My original number is 2/3. Okay? So my answer is 2/3 here. Let's try 14. Which is greater, 5/6 or 3/4? Well, I'm going to change. Can I change 6 into a 4? Like 6 times a number, 6 divided by a number, can it become a 4? No. What about this? Can I change a 4 into a 6? 4 times a number gets you 6, or 4 divided by a number gets you 6? No. So what I'm going to do is I have to think of another number where I can find the same denominator where it's equivalent, okay? So 12, okay? If I change the denominators to 12, I know that 6 times a number can get you 12, and also I know that 4 times a number can get you 12. Okay, so that will be my equivalent fraction. So I'm going to find equivalent fractions for both of these now. Okay, so let's first work with 5/6. Okay, so 6 to 12, I get it by multiplying. I multiplied 6 by 2 to get 12. And I'm going to do the same thing to the numerator. So 5 times 2 is 10. So my equivalent fraction of 5/6 is 10/12. I'm going to write that above here, 5/6, so I won't forget. That's what I'm referring to. Now 3/4, 4 to 12. Did I multiply a number or divide a number to get 12? Well, I multiplied a number to get 12. 4 times 3 gets you 12. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So 3 times 3 gets you 9. So my equivalent fraction of 3/4 is 9/12. I'm going to write 9/12 above 3/4 so I remember that's my equivalent fraction. Oh, sweet. So now I have a pair of like fractions because the denominator is the same. And with like fractions, all I need to do is look at the numerators to see which fraction is bigger. So let's see, which is greater, 10/12 or 9/12? Well, 10 is greater than 9, so 10/12 is greater than 9/12. But remember, my original fraction is not 10/12, it's 5/6. So that's my answer. I have to use my original fraction in my answer, which is 5/6. All right, let's keep going. So now we're going to use benchmarks to compare unlike fractions. Do you remember what unlike means? Unlike means different fractions with different denominators. And we're going to learn what benchmark means shortly. So let's look here. It says compare the fractions 3/4 and 1/6 with the benchmark fraction 1/2. Now, benchmark is a common, it's an easy fraction or a number to use to compare with other numbers. So, with like whole numbers like 0, 5, 10, 20, 100, those might be benchmark numbers. But with fractions, you can use 0, 1/2, and 1, okay, as a benchmark to just kind of see, where it lies on the number line. Okay, so 0, 1/2, and 1 are common benchmarks used when we talk about fractions. Okay, now first, let's look at the fraction 1/2. That's our benchmark fraction. If I want to draw a number line, my number line will go from 0 to 1, and how many parts do I divide it into? Look at the denominator. The denominator tells us the total number of parts, which is 2 parts. Okay, so it'll look something like this: 0. And here's 2 parts into 1, and then this is just 1/2, okay, in the middle. Now, let's look at the fraction 3/4. Let's draw a new number line. In this new number line, it's going to go from 0 to 1, and it's going to be the same size as my first number line. From 0 to 1, that'll be the same, right? It's the same part of the whole, but it's 3/4. So how my number line has to be divided into how many parts? Look at the denominator. It's 4 parts, okay? So it should look something like this. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? All right. And now let's look at my fraction 1/6, and let's draw a new number line. It's going to go from 0 to 1, just like the first number line and my second number line. But how many parts will I divide my number line here? My third number line, how many parts? Look at the denominator in 1/6. The denominator tells us the total number of parts it has. It has 6. So my third number line will be divided into 6 parts, like so. Okay, so let's make sure it's 6. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 6 parts. Great. Notice my zeros are all lined up and my 1 is all lined up. Okay? Because we can compare these fractions, making sure that they're the same part of the whole when we look at something visually. Okay, so now that we have that, let's mark where 1/2 is on our first number line. Okay, there it is. Here's 1/2 right here. Okay, let's mark where 3/4 is on our second number line. Here it is. And let's mark where 1/6 is on our third number line. There it is. Okay. So notice here, I see that 3/4 is greater than 1/2 because it goes past 1/2, right? And then it looks like 1/6 is less than 1/2 because it comes before 1/2 on the number line. Do you see that? Okay. And so, because of that, because 3/4 is greater than 1/2, 1/6 is less than 1/2, I know that 3/4 is greater than 1/6. Or you can even say 1/6 is less than 3/4. All right. Can you please try numbers 15 and 16 on your own? Okay. And when you're ready, you can just play the video. Okay. All right. See you soon. Hi, welcome back. So let's take a look and see what you did. Now we're going to use these number lines to compare fractions with 1/2, which will be our benchmark fraction. Okay, so we have our first number line has our fraction of 1/2. Okay, now let's look here at 5/6. Okay, that look at the denominator 6. So it's a number line where it's divided into 6 parts, and my second number line has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts. Okay, so that's 6. Can you find 5, 6 on the second number line? There it is. Now let's look at our fraction here, 3/8. Okay, that refers to our last number line because that's divided into 8 parts. Okay, can you find 3/8 on the third number line? There it is. Okay, so now I see that 5/6 is greater than 1/2. 3/8 is less than 1/2. So which is greater, 5/6 or 3/8? 5/6 is greater. Okay. All right, let's look at number 16. So again, we're using 1/2 as our benchmark fraction over here. Okay. And which is greater, 2/5 or 3/8? So let's look at 2/5 right now. Okay, that's our second number line because our second number line is divided into 5 equal parts. And where is 2/5 on our second number line? There it is. Let's look at our fraction 5/8. Now that refers to our third number line because our third number line is divided into 8 equal parts. Can you find 5/8 on our third number line? There it is. When I look at this compared to 1/2, I see that 5/8 is greater than 1/2 and 2/5 is less than 1/2. So which is greater, 2/5 or 5/8? 5/8 is greater. All right, you're getting this. Let's compare and order unlike fractions. Now, remember, unlike fractions means fractions with different denominators. Now, you can use benchmark fractions to do this. You can use bar models to do this. But I'm going to use equivalent fractions to do this because in the real world during math class and on assessments later on, you won't have the time to draw number lines and to draw bar models because that can take some time, right? So I would recommend just working with equivalent fractions. I think you have a good foundation if you understand the number lines and you understand the bar models. But from going forward, we're going to just keep practicing more with equivalent fractions. Okay, so now we're going to order the fractions from least to greatest. So look at these 3 fractions. We have 7/8, 1/4, and 1/2. Are these 3 fractions like fractions or unlike fractions? They're unlike fractions because they have different denominators. You see that? 8, 4, and 2. They're different, so they're unlike fractions. So to be able to compare them and order them properly, we need to make them into like fractions, okay, where the denominator is the same. So we have a denominator of 8, 4, and 2. Let's see. I can change 4 into 8 by multiplying it by a 2. I can change 2 into 8 by multiplying it by a 4. So that's perfect. So I'm going to keep 7/8 the same, okay, because I want the denominator of 8 in all my other fractions. So now let's work with our fraction 1/4. So 1/4 is equivalent to a new fraction where my denominator is an 8. So 4 to 8. I had to multiply 2 to get 8. 4 times 2 is 8. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. 1 times 2 is 2. So here's my equivalent fraction of 1/4, which is 2/8. And it has my denominator of 8 that I wanted. Perfect. So I'm going to put that here. Okay, so my 1/4, my equivalent fraction is 2/8. 2/8. Now, let's work with our third fraction here, 1/2. So 1/2, I want to find an equivalent fraction where my denominator will be an 8 because it makes it easy for me to compare with the other fractions if the denominator is the same. So 1/2 is equivalent to what 8s? Well, let's look at the denominators. from 2 to 8, what did I do to 2 to get 8? I multiplied 4. So 2 times 4 is 8. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. 1 times 4 is 4. So my equivalent fraction of 1/2 is 4/8. And I'm going to write that right here so I don't forget, okay? So my equivalent fraction of 1/2 is 4/8. But I'm not done because it says I have to order my fractions from least to greatest. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So first I'm going to just use my like fractions to do that, okay, because it's easy for me to compare. So I have to go from least to greatest, which means lowest to highest. So just look at the numerator. So 2, then 4, then 7. Okay, so here it is, 2/8 to 4/8, and then to 7/8. But I'm still not done. Do you know why? I have to use the original fractions that were given in the problem. These were my original fractions, okay? So I noticed that I have a 7/8, but in my original fractions, I don't have a 4/8 or 2/8, okay? So I know my 2/8 original fraction is 1/4, and my 4/8 original fraction is 1/2. Now I can use this to answer my question completely, okay? So now here it is from least to greatest, using my original fractions. And here's my final answer. All right, it's your turn. So please try number 22 on your own. You're going to order the fractions from greatest to least, not least to greatest. Okay, I'll be waiting. Hi. All right, so let's see here. So I have 2/3, 1/2, and 5/6. So these are unlike fractions because they have different denominators. Your goal is to make these fractions into like fractions where the denominators are the same. So we have a denominator of a 3, 2, and 6. You know what I noticed right away? My denominator here can become 6's really easily. 3 times 2 gets me 6. 2 times 3 gets me 6. And 6 times 1 just gets me 6, right? So I can just keep 5, 6 the same. So I'm going to keep that the same because it has my denominator that I want of 6. So now let's look at 2/3. And I want to find my equivalent fraction where my denominator is a 6. So 3 times what got me 6? 3 times 2 got me 6. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. 2 times what gets me 6? 2 times what? I have to do 2 times 2 because that's what I did in the denominator. So 2 times 2 is 4. So my equivalent fraction of 2/3 is 4/6. So I'm going to write it here right away so I don't forget. There it is. All right, next let's work with this fraction, 1/2. So now I want to change my 1/2 into an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 6 because all my other fractions have a 6 in it, okay? And so 2 times what gets me 6 is 2 times 3 gets me 6. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So 1 times 3 gets you 3. So my equivalent fraction of 1/2 is 3/6. So I'm going to write it here right away. Awesome. So now I have I have a group of like fractions where my denominator is the same as 6, 6, and 6, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to order them from greatest to least using my equivalent fractions first. All right, so the greatest, I have to look at the numerator. So 5 is greater, then next is 4, then it's 3, right? So here it is, 5, 6, 4, 6, 3, 6. But I am not done because I have to use the original fractions given in the problem. So let's see, do I have a 5, 6 in my original problem? I do, it's right here. So I can keep that. What about my 4, 6? I don't have a 4, 6. What about 3, 6? I don't have a 3, 6, but I know what it refers to, right? Because I can look at my notes here that I took. So 4, 6 is 2/3, and 3, 6 is 1/2. Okay? So that's what I wrote at the top, and I want to be neat, so I'm going to erase that and write it like this: 5, 6, 2/3, and 1/2. And then I'm going to box it to let you know this is my final answer. With all of my work that's shown here, I'm going to box my final answer. Woo! All right. So I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're starting to get it bit by bit. Okay, you're working your muscles, you're working your brain. Okay, and we'll practice more on Thursday. Bye.